unfortunately, for a lot of us, preparing successfully for retirement can seem super complicated. But it doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be super difficult. There's some key fundamentals that if we master those, it's going to take care of 90% of the challenges of preparing successfully for retirement. So let's jump in. Let's talk about the number one money rule. And I need to back up just for a brief second and share that fewer than 10% of all Americans are going to retire with $1 million or more. And I'm not saying you need $1 million to retire. As I said, fewer than 10% of us are going to have that. But the concepts here apply regardless of what your financial goal is. So the number one money rule is $1,000 is only 10 doubles away from $1 million, right? You've got 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and $1 million. So it's 10 doubles away, and it's not easy to get doubles. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But going from $1,000 to $1 million is going to be very challenging for most people. But what if you've already got a base that you've saved? What if you've already got, let's say, close to $30,000? And what if you could save an extra $10,000 a year? So an extra $10,000 a year is a little less than an extra $200 a week over 12 months. What would that look like over a 5-year period, assuming that you got an 8% return? So again, $30,000, actually the math is closer to 28K. But if you can add $10,000 to that over 5 years, now you've got $100,000. And getting to that first $100,000 is really one of the keys. You know, Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's business partner, would actually say the number one money rule is do whatever you have to do to get to $100,000. And I would agree that's one of the top 5 rules. But for the sake of this video, I'm talking about number one money rule is looking at doubling. And then we're going to break down what it takes to double. But again, if you have close to $30,000 and you save an extra $10,000 a year, you add $10,000 a year to that. In 5 years at 8%, which is pretty reasonable to assume, in 5 years, you're going to have $100,000. Now, how many doubles does it take to get from $100,000 to $1 million? Well, 100 goes into 200, 400, 800, and then you're $1.6 million. So it's a little over 3 doubles for you to go from 100,000 to $1 million. So could most of us start saving an extra $10,000 a year? I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's possible for everybody. But for a lot of us, we're one part-time job away from that. We're turning one hobby into a little bit of a business away from doing that. It's maybe upskilling our skill set so we can make a little bit more money at work. It's $200 a week. And again, I'm breaking this down so that it's more digestible chunks, and we see that it's possible. So if once you've saved your first $30,000, and a lot of my audience is in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s, we've got a base already. If we can add to that base at a rate of $10,000 a year, you know, $28,000, add to it $10,000 a year in 5 years, 8%, you're going to have 100,000, and then you've got to be able to double it. So what does it take to be able to double your money? And you know, the challenge is if we try to double our money in a short period of time, yes, it might work, but we also might lose 100% of what we have. And as you're in your 40s, your 50s and 60s, you know, job number one is not to lose the nest egg that you have. But what does it take to double your money? There's a rule in my industry, there's a rule of thumb, kind of a cheat code for us, which is the rule of 72. And it says that if you take the rate of return that your money is getting and you divide it by 72, that's how many years it's going to take. Actually, I inverted that. 72 divided by your rate of return is how many years it's going to take to double. So for instance, 72 divided by 8 is 9. So if you get an 8% return, the rule of 72 says it's going to take you 9 years to double that. And that's probably a decent return to target at 12%. What's 72 divided by 12? It's 6. So it's going to double in 6 years. So we want to be careful. You know, Warren Buffett, I talked about Charlie Munger. Warren Buffett would say the number one rule in money management is don't lose money. And the second rule in money management is never forget rule number one. And Warren Buffett's a very wise man. That's good advice. But I want to share with you, getting to that $1 million level is not as impossible as it sounds. Certainly having time on your side, if you're watching this and you're in your 20s or 30s, you have a lot more time to let things compound. You have a lot more time to let those doubles take place. But if you're older, you know, hopefully one of the things you're taking away from this video is just how important that rate of return is. And that comes down to your asset allocation. 80%, I would argue, of what return you're going to get over time is driven by your asset allocation. What percent of your portfolio is in stocks? What percent of your portfolio is in bonds? And I really encourage you to work with a professional to get that right, because you don't want to take too little risk, because you see how important the rate of return is. If you get a 6% return, it's going to take 12 years for that money to double, versus an 8% return, it's going to take 9 years. That's a lot, that 3 years, and then it compounds on itself. So I would encourage you, none of this is financial advice for your situation. I don't know your situation. So unfortunately, I cannot give you, no YouTuber can give you financial advice. I encourage you to work with a fee-only financial advisor to make sure you have your asset allocation correct, so you're not too conservative, but conversely, you're not too aggressive either. You see a train coming by here. So get that asset allocation right. Start saving up money, whatever you can do to level up your skills, to make that extra $200 a week. Maybe a part-time job, but something as small as an extra $200 a week can really make a big difference. So Azul's number one rule of finance is looking at what it takes to double your money. Charlie Munger would say, do what you have to do to get that first 100,000. And Warren Buffett would say, rule number one is don't lose money. And rule number two is never forget about rule number one. So there's a selection of number one money management rules. And then another secret is, you know, no matter how much you're making, spend less than what you're earning in order to save money. And that's what this video up here is about, which is why looking poor is important. I hope you enjoy it. I'll see you in that video.